Welcome to the latest episode of PiXL Drone Show, a weekly podcast where we talk to people doing all sorts of cool things in the drone industry. I'm Kara Murphy, and my co-host today is Haya Kestelou of DroneXL. Greg Reverdio of Pilot Institute is unfortunately not able to be with us today. We're coming up on almost a year now, and I'm really excited to share that one of my guests is a former colleague from Interdrone Expo. CJ Smith is now Adorama's category marketing manager for drones. He also contributes to their official blog, 42 West, which I highly encourage everyone to check out. For those not familiar, Adorama is one of the biggest and most established retailers for camera gear in the world. Also with us today is James Bushey, Adorama's Director of Technical Services and a UAS training instructor. It is great to have you both on here today. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So just to kick things off, what inspired both of you to get into drones?
Yeah, I can start. So thanks again for having us. CJ Smith, marketing manager for Adorama. As Kara mentioned on the intro, I used to work for Interdrone, the International Drone Conference and Exposition. That was actually my first really foray into the drone space. So, consumer drones, hobbyist drones. I had friends that flew them, and I always thought it was fascinating. But that was my time at Interdrone was the first time I really got to see the enterprise drone side of the industry and how companies, agencies, state and local governments, all the way up to the federal government are using drones for various different types of missions and saving time and money along the way. One of our constituents said that the drones are always good at doing the 3Ds, so the dirty, the dull, and the dangerous. And that's been something that I try to repeat a lot when we're speaking to our potential customers. So really just been hooked ever since. I love technology. Aviation has always been interesting to me. Anything disruptive is fascinating to me, and I think the drone industry kind of lies at the intersection of all three of those pieces. So
that's cool. How about you, James?
So I originally went to school, to college for photography back when film was still king, and I saw the transition of film into digital. And at the time I was going to school, I worked for a company called Radio Shack, and so we were always tinkering with things, building RC planes and helicopters and our little back workshop. And then fast forward from that, I switched gears, went into law enforcement, which I just stepped out of after 16 years, where we started a drone program about 7 years ago. And we were the only game around for that for public safety in our area at the time. And so kind of meshing all that stuff together, Adorama given me an offer to come over and work with them to kind of help train other agencies across the board with drone technology, because it's been evolving so quickly, and the use cases and that type of thing that would be good to have. So it's kind of where I blended all those things together, and here I am now. So
awesome. I want to circle back to you real quick, CJ. So as a marketing manager for drones for Adorama, what do you guys do to market drones? I mean, what does that entail?
Yeah, so I think when people hear about Adorama, a lot of people are familiar with the website, selling camera equipment, and a lot of times are familiar with the consumer side. So we sell consumer drones to hobbyists, from DJI to Autel to even the cheaper drones that people are given to their nieces and nephews, and then also the enterprise side of things, and that's where we leverage James' expertise a lot too. So my job is really to manage the marketing presence for Adorama, both on the consumer side and also to enterprise. So when it comes to consumer, it's a lot of the standard marketing channels that we're familiar with, like social media and email, blog writing. And then on the enterprise side, we do a lot of in-person events, from demo days to small conferences, to webinars and white papers and longer form editorial content. So there's just always a need for education on the enterprise side. And my job is to help facilitate that, but then also really bridge the gap and make sure that we're going after the hobbyists and the agencies and organizations equally, and making sure that we have a different marketing strategy and plan in place to go after both of those subsets of the overall drone market.
Has your role been different and impacted by COVID and the fact that there weren't as many in-person conventions, expos, that kind of thing?
Man, yeah, it definitely had. I think obviously working remote is the biggest impact that we were all most of us were challenged with right off the bat. Yeah. The lack of events definitely had. We've seen that impact kind of our strategy, especially for the larger drone events, which draw in large international audiences. One thing that we've been able to do to kind of offset that is doing a lot of these smaller events. So sometimes these could be a 300-person expo for a local tactical officer association or something like that. And I'll support James, and we'll bring out a bunch of the drone equipment and do booths at some of these smaller events that were less impacted by COVID. Less attendees overall, less international travel, maybe more of a local audience. So we have obviously seen COVID affect everything, but we've been able to pivot, and I don't think we've had too much of a slowdown in kind of our primary marketing functions.
So how about you, James? How did you get started with Adorama, and how would you describe your role?
Yeah, so I started as a customer of Adorama's when I was about 13 years old, buying camera equipment. I have a family of photographers, and that was, looking in the back of Popular Photography magazine and picking out what I wanted, and kind of shopping through them that way. And through the years, progressed on the law enforcement side of things, because Adorama carries so many different things, computers and networking gear. Our department would buy a lot of those products from our sales rep. And then when we branched into drones, naturally, kind of started with them on that side of it as well. And so over the course of time, I've always liked to kind of, dissect, the different things that we get in technology to see like what makes them tick, what makes them operate the way they do, and really understand it at a much deeper level than just kind of surfing, menus and submenus and that type of thing. And so when I would go out and use it for something I thought was, had a good purpose to it, or something that would be helpful to the salespeople at Adorama, I would just share, some of the videos I took when I was out on the search and rescue scene or an Overwatch scene, and just give it along to them. It's just like, hey, if you have other law enforcement or public safety partners you think could benefit from seeing what this drone can actually do in these types of environments, please just feel free to share it. And they always kind of joked over time, like, oh, one of these days we're going to steal you away from law enforcement. And, okay, down the line, just kind of joke around about it. And then it became more serious as time progressed, and they started contracting me, and then eventually I came on full time with them. So.
There you go. And you mentioned in your introduction that you had a background in, or you just said it, in law enforcement. Can you tell us exactly what you did and how you were using drones in that environment?
Yeah. So I ended as the chief of police in an area, the southeast corner of Wisconsin, about an hour and a half north of Chicago, Illinois. So just over the Wisconsin border. And the community that I work in was heavily geared in the summer like vacationer side of things. So we have a lot of high-end clientele that come out of Chicago. We would often have parties where James Taylor would show up, the Beach Boys and Diana Ross. And so we would, because we had such a small manpower department and these large-scale events to cover, we were leveraging technology as much as we could in those environments to kind of help us keep track of what was going on across the property, make sure we didn't have unwanted people coming in. So everything from that to doing search and rescue on the lake or out in the middle of fields where we might have a small child go missing or somebody with Alzheimer's. So we were kind of bouncing around in a lot of different use cases for the drones, everything out to, if you're familiar with the Kyle Rittenhouse situation that happened in Kenosha, I ran air operations several of those days when I was, we were asked to come out and help out in those environments, I guess we'll say, all across Wisconsin and Illinois.
So it sounds like you've been using drones for quite some time. We always like to promote drones when they're being used for good. Do you have any success stories from back then, from search and rescue missions?
We do, yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
we had two back-to-back, pretty close to one another. We had an elderly female who had wandered out into, who had Alzheimer's, wandered out into a cattle pasture, and it was sub-zero freezing temperatures. They had realized probably an hour or so after she had gone missing that she wasn't, around. And obviously time was of the essence when it was in those types of temperatures, and where could she have gone? And so it wasn't our jurisdiction, it was a neighboring jurisdiction. We were called out there to assist, and within about 8 minutes, we found her lying amongst the cattle in the pasture, and were able to get her back in safely from that. So, and we had another similar situation, but with a smaller child that had gone missing. So that is really why we started our drone program. Was we have 36 square miles and 8 or 9 officers as a whole team. So 1 to 2 people a shift really that are out at any one time. So for us, if something happens in time is of the essence, to be able to leverage a robot to go out there and help us do a lot of that work where we can't get 50 people or 100 people, hand in hand to go out and look in that pasture or those fields and that type of thing to look for somebody.
Yeah, we covered quite a few of those kind of stories on DroneXL as well, and it always amazes me how quickly first responders are able to find people. Quite often, actually, with drones and thermal cameras, where it happens in minutes, and meanwhile they have tens of volunteers walking around in the dark, and they're unable to find that person. So I think that's probably one of the best use cases of drones.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Adorama has a rich history, starting off in New York City, where there was a physical storefront built that is still there to this day. And when the founder died a few years back, there was an incredible outpouring of love and support for his family. I'd like to hear from you. What makes Adorama so special, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, it's almost synonymous with New York. I know that's a little bit of an extreme statement, but I mean, like you mentioned, the storefront was there since 1974. A lot of people think of Adorama right now as a big e-commerce website, which we are, but Adorama has been around since long before the internet, and they were selling products out of their brick and mortar store, and they've always hired from within the city, and really grown and become kind of a part of the community. And so, I think that rich history, just the dedication to its customers. I mean, there are lots of loyal customers that have been shopping with Adorama for dozens of years, 20, 30 years even sometimes. And that always amazes me. Even just when I'm out talking with people, I let them know I work for Adorama, and you always are surprised to hear who knows Adorama and their relationship with the brand. So I think what kind of makes it a little bit unique too is just the dedication to customers. So from customer support to building out a whole team like James's team, he leads a team of technical specialists, and their job is to help customers understand the products that we're selling. We're selling products like drones, which customers have lots of questions, and these are expensive flying robots that come with different software and rules and regulations, require training. And so Adorama is really there to support and, really just hold the hand of companies, of local governments, and even consumers and hobbyists through their purchase cycle and ask the questions or answer the questions that these people have. So that's, I guess, to me, what makes it kind of special. And James has been a longtime customer. I'm sure he can even speak to on that side of things, what his experience with the company.
Yeah, I know, at least on the professional side, when I was a customer and the law enforcement side of things, if I talk to anybody on their B2B team, it seemed like everybody kind of remembers who you are, even though I'm some small town police department in Wisconsin. When I could call up and talk to somebody like, oh, hey, James, how's it going? Oh, how's that drone working? Or how's that computer working? We sold you, that type of thing. Anything come up? It was always seemed like there was a lot of personability, like in your interactions with people there, like always wanting to, make sure everything was good. And then you knew who you were going to call and talk to. It wasn't just some random operator that you got on the phone with. And, they would do a lot of digging for you if they weren't exactly sure what the solution was or how we go about getting it. They would do the homework and come back with you and get you an answer. So I think that's something that's been really important. Why I chose to come to Adorama, I had a really good job in law enforcement. I had no reason, to leave where I was at. But I liked what I was doing with them as a contractor, and then, kind of seeing as where they want to evolve to, like where they're at even now, and then where they want to see themselves get to is something that is a roadmap that I agree with and want to be a part of. So.
It sounds like having that storefront initially and also having that personal connection over the phone has always been important. I believe that you guys started the website, adorama.com, back in '98, so early days for sure. How do you translate a marketing strategy that used to work in brick and mortar stores to then online? Like, how is that different when you don't have that immediate feedback from customers when you talk to them?
Yeah, and candidly, that was a little bit before I think both of our times there. But there are a lot of folks on the marketing team that have been around and are and been working in a marketing function since before that function existed. And I always bring up like our pay-per-click PPC marketing examples. A lot of these folks have been there and are doing these jobs and have been in that role since before there was that technology to even need that role. So you've got a lot of the marketing team that's been here for a long time, and they've just learned new marketing tactics and learned the new marketing strategies that are out there for companies to engage with each other. And then they've been with Adorama for a long time. They know the brand better than anybody. And, they're committed to kind of adapting and innovating and keeping Adorama current on all sorts of marketing trends and activities. So
that makes sense. And, is it harder to give people a convincing reason to, let's say, buy from you guys instead of some of the competition when online is really your only channel of communication in many transactions?
So I think it comes back to like what James and I were alluding to earlier, just with the customer service, the hand-holding through the purchase cycle, having having expertise and specialists on hand that can talk about when it comes to drones, right? Software, payloads. I think a lot of competitors, not only do they not have the in-house experts to talk about what to buy, but Adorama actually does all the support on the other side after the purchase as well. So we can repair drones. We'll buy back your used drones if you are an agency and want to upgrade. And we can even finance the new drones that you do purchase. So for us on the drone side, we're really building out a whole ecosystem that provides kind of unmatched customer support. And we think this is the best way to kind of help the proliferation of this technology. And we talked about drones for good. This is, we all believe that this technology will change the world and really do some great things. And so this is the best way that we can kind of help create a sustainable industry in the country right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement for sure. Does this also mean that if, let's say, there's a police department that doesn't have a drone program yet and they call Adorama or they go through your site, would you guys be able to help them from start to finish to basically set up their drone program, supply the hardware, train people, service them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do that quite a bit. Anytime we come in interaction with somebody or we get a lead, a lot of times. So my team is directly like kind of the backbone to the sales division. So, we have salespeople that get on the phone with somebody, they bring us in, and then we can kind of talk to the program that they're trying to stand up if it's something brand new, or they're looking to expand on an already existing program, and kind of figure out, like, a lot of questions we get asked with those are, I'm not sure if I'm training to the best of my ability, or I've done all the trainings I should be doing, and how do I know then? How do we hit those benchmarks? And a lot of those things. So a lot of our questions that we answer for clients, because myself and Jake, one of my colleagues who have done a lot of drone operations in our previous lives, Jake was big into the mining and like an agriculture side of things with drones. So we kind of bring both of our insights in to kind of showcase, like, hey, these are some of the training practices we used over here, and this is what works well. And just kind of talking about those things just to kind of help them understand, like, where you're at now, maybe where you should be, and kind of checking those boxes, which a lot of people just aren't exactly sure about. But yeah, we do that all day long for customers. It's just kind of do virtual demos, in-person demos, trainings, whatever they need.
Yeah, because that basically what you said is exactly what we noticed, was that there's agency, they want to start a drone program, and we could sell them a drone, but they're not going to get the most value from it. If they have a bad experience, they're not going to come back and buy more. There are, different software integrations they need to know about. There's a ton of training that goes into this. And we just found out that all these agencies and organizations had all of these questions, and, just pushing boxes is not, it's not going to give them the best experience, and they're not going to end up being a return customer. So that's why we are building out this whole ecosystem. And we have, experts like James that he started his own drone program at his agency. So he can talk to this stuff from personal experience. He knows what's worked, what hasn't worked, and he can provide all sorts of insight to these agencies that are starting a drone program, and really just help them do it the right way the first time.
Makes a lot of sense that you would want to hire somebody like James with firsthand knowledge and experience there. How is it different though when you market to first responders? How is that different from marketing, let's say, to regular people who buy drones for Christmas, birthdays, for hobbies, who don't need an entire program, for instance?
Yeah, it's completely different. It's almost two different marketing strategies, and so that's one of my biggest job for me is identifying that split, what's going to work for these two different markets. And then even within the enterprise category, there's public safety. And even within public safety, there's fire and police departments. But then there's private industry, oil and gas, cinematography, asset and infrastructure inspection. And, I'm trying to come up with different marketing plans and strategies for all those markets as well, just within enterprise drones. So I think, to your point, a lot of times, at least on the enterprise side, these two companies may be using an M300, but they're using it completely differently, and they can't really learn that much from each other. And so we're trying to create content, create education, and bring on specialists under James's team that are well versed in these different industries and can help those private companies.
What would you say is Adorama's biggest competition?
Amazon is I think a competition for every kind of CPG company or consumer company, any e-commerce company. So they obviously have great shipping times. They can get products anywhere in the world in a fraction of times that most companies can. That being said, we are building out a whole new warehouse that will be able to provide 2-day shipping to, I think, 95% of the country. Don't quote me, but I know it's something. It's a number like that. And then additionally, how we differentiate is kind of what we've been alluding to a lot of the time here is just that hand holding, that expertise. We'll be there to answer the questions. There's not a ton of that, at least from Amazon or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I think you're right on that part. You're not going to get the training and the support from Amazon in the way that you guys will be able to deliver that. How big is Adorama in terms of the number of people that work there, and how do you split that between people that work in the store? Because I know the store is still there. I've been there not too long ago, actually. And then also the group of people that are purely dedicated to online marketing or training or help with running the website.
Yeah, I think, James, you have the latest.
We were just talking about it. I think as a whole, because Adorama has some sister companies, we were right around 740 employees, and they were hoping to be somewhere around, I think, 900 by the end of the year, and because they've been rapidly expanding. So yeah.
Oh wow, you guys have big plans for 2022.
We do, yeah, full speed ahead. So with like as they were mentioning before, like the warehousing and kind of expanding that across the country, and then more service options. So, I know that we're doing a lot of stuff with guitars and guitar repair now, drones and drone repair, and camera repair. So it's, not just the selling of products, it's also the back end support to those things. And like you said, the marketing and all of that. So.
Yep. Exactly.
So when it comes to drones, in your estimation, what do you think are some of the best sellers on there?
I can speak to, at least on the consumer side, we see a lot of DJI sales. I don't think that's a huge surprise to anybody. I think one thing that may be a little interesting to the viewers is that the Fly More kits and the Fly More bundles are almost always purchased more than just the single drones themselves. So just goes to show you the batteries are important. People want those spare batteries. And as far as the models, I think the Mini 2 has been popular, but then if moving up, those mid-level tiers like the Air 2, Air 2S. Those have been extremely popular. We've even seen some agencies and organizations purchase those to just do some training, just to get their sea legs, for lack of a better word, with DJI platform before moving up to something like an M2EA, a DJI Enterprise Advanced or something like that. And James can speak even more to some of the enterprise drones in which he's been seeing a lot of traction with.
Yeah, we've seen, I think this has been a big year for seeing people step out of like those Mavic size drones and stepping into like the M300 platforms where, kind of like CJ said, getting their sea legs, where now they feel comfortable flying these smaller platforms and kind of seeing, what they can do in optimizing that solution, but then where its limitations hit and where they really want to step up into the next level of performance and like capabilities and that type of thing. So there's been some, supply chain issues, obviously, where I've noticed some people who were maybe more dedicated to one brand switching to another just because they don't want to wait.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about 2022. Are there any things that you guys have planned from Adorama in terms of drones, or are there any big product launches that you can share a little bit about, perhaps?
Product launches, I can say yes. I can't give too much more detail on that. We're kind of held by the vendors to keep that information private, but there will be some big exciting stuff coming this year. So definitely stay tuned. As far as marketing, we're going to be out creating a lot more content. We want to create a lot of use case videos, get James and our other specialists out in the field and get a camera crew out there and actually show kind of a full comprehensive use and a mission with this aircraft. So it's less than, showing an M300 in the air and saying it has this flight time with this type of sensor and this resolution, but more how are you using drones for search and rescue, what you may need, and really provide kind of that level of information to our customers. That's what we think is really missing right now in the market. So you'll see a lot of that from us. On the other side of things, you'll see Adorama on the road a lot. So James is super busy doing small demo days. So he'll go out and show various different systems to one or two local agencies and give them kind of a hands-on experience for half a day. We've seen that has been extremely effective for you just got to see it to believe it some of the times, or just see it to kind of understand the value and be there to ask questions with somebody like James. These demo days have been extremely important and valuable for us. So we'll keep doing that. And then we'll be on the road at a number of different conferences. We're looking at AUVSI this year, we're looking at ComUAV again, and then a lot of the smaller, with James's sake, a lot of the smaller law enforcement shows. So I know he was just in one in Wisconsin. We'll be in Michigan and Indiana. And driving around and expoing at these. And I think the last piece is your viewers may be aware, but the Florida drone ban, as some people are calling it, but Florida came down and basically said that governments in their state are only allowed to purchase Blue UAS, which are the same 75 drones that were made available to the federal government. I think in 2020 they announced that. So we're going to be down in Florida showing off the drones that we have, which are approved on that list. We'll talk to them about buying back the drones, which these agencies had, which they're not allowed to use at the beginning of 2023 due to this list. We can finance the new drones that they are purchasing. And then we can train them on the new systems as well. So we'll be in Florida a decent amount this year, trying to help agencies kind of grapple with this news and figure out what's best for their departments as they move forward, because they have until 2023, January 1st, to basically retire any of the non-approved drones that they're flying.
A follow-up question I have on this, though, is how disruptive is that when you have departments that might have bought 5 or 10 of a certain type of, or DJI drone, basically, and have people trained and have all the equipment and hardware? Like, how disruptive is it when all of a sudden they can't use those drones anymore?
That's huge. I know, speaking from experience, and knowing how government spending works, and, when you get a certain allotment of money that you only have, you can only use so much or so often. So you're stuck with something for several years, now all of a sudden you get, like you said, this disruptive, patch that comes in here where now you have to try and figure out, well, what am I going to get for these drones? I just invested a lot of money and energy training and keeping going, and now have to all of a sudden figure out a new system, which a lot of those systems are much more expensive, to get into initially. And then there's the training and learning curve that goes with those. So yeah, it's we've noticed a lot, like even here in Wisconsin, they had one that was just trying to go through recently to ban DJI specifically. And there's a lot of agencies had no idea it was even coming. And so they were all of a sudden like, what are you talking about? Like, we're going to not be able to use these drones. I just bought one last year. We didn't know this was happening. And now all of a sudden, how do I explain this to, there's some agencies that are very concerned they won't have a drone program anymore just because they've already spent that kind of money and money is so tight. Now what do I do? So.
Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you invest in drones, you don't expect them to last forever necessarily, but you should be able to get a good few years out of them before you need to upgrade, right? I mean, and especially the expensive models like the M300s, that budget, adds up, I guess.
Yeah, and for these small agencies too, it may have taken them 5 years to build their whole fleet up, and now they essentially have 1 year to replace it, and they have small budgets, and it's tight. So that's why we think, offering financing is really important, so that these agencies can pay these drones off over 5 or so years, and be able to basically get their fleets back to where it was before this ruling, and hopefully not, there'll still be a hiccup there, but hopefully it won't be as bad as if they needed to really replace everything all in 1 year.
So there are misconceptions surrounding drones, I think thanks in part to some members of the media, but what do you think is the biggest misconception about drones for your audience, and how do you help educate them that drones are in fact good?
We, when we were starting our drone program in my local community, a lot of people thought that we were militarizing, essentially, like we were going to be doing what they're doing overseas, and the word drone really had this kind of negative connotation to it. And so we were trying to get people to understand, hey, we're just a local agency, we have very limited manpower, and we're trying to leverage technology on our behalf to help us do the work out there that we wouldn't normally have. And so, I think there's definitely been a lot of progress on that front where people now feel a little more comfortable, but still, like, there's the people that have some of the public have some, I think, just a lot of misconceptions of what they think that we're out here trying to do with this type of technology in public safety. So just educating the public, on that behalf, and then also educating the users in these public safety entities to do it the right way, because anything that one department does is going to have a black eye on the whole industry. And so that's one of the most important things for us, is making sure that we're passing on the right information, and we're pushing on people that, hey, if you're going to invest in this, also invest in making sure that you launch it the right way and maintain it correctly, so that the next agency down the line isn't going to pay for the mistakes that you make. So.
Mm-hmm.
So with both of you actively working hard on the marketing strategy for Adorama, where would you like to be in, let's say, 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to be a household name and kind of the go-to place for purchasing drones. And again, it's not just the aircraft. We want to be a kind of a one-stop shop for all of your accessories, your software, different payloads you might need, and then obviously all the support on the backside, from training to financing, and even buying back drones when you're ready to upgrade. So we really want our ecosystem. We call it the Adorama drone ecosystem. You can learn about it more on the website, but we really want to get that just in front of every agency and organization, and because we know we can help them. Basically, we have the experts on staff. We don't push products that we don't believe in or that we've had bad experiences with, and that's always been really important for us. So we know that if the technology, in order to have the technology be sustainable and like implemented sustainably and have a successful kind of impact on society, we need to just help people use it the right way and get value from it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So I think this might be directed more towards James, but CJ, please feel free to jump in. Could you tell us a little bit more about what being a drone pilot for Adorama entails?
Yeah, so I guess for us, we have our in-house team. We also have some subcontractors, but we kind of go through a more in-depth vetting process to make sure that the people that are going to be the ones talking to the end users in whatever facet that is have some type of real world experience. And, our team doesn't just try to take everything on individually. We all kind of, round table together and make sure that we're bouncing ideas off each other to make, see if there's anything that we, one has missed or or other ideas that someone's taken from a different, background in drones, like Jake doing confined space flying and me doing more public safety. We kind of talk about some of the similarities in those, facets, but then also, the differences in something maybe he's done that I haven't. So we really try and bring people in that have had a wealth of knowledge actually using the products in the field, that they can then turn around and talk to people about that reality when we're talking about purchasing stuff. So that's the biggest thing I think in our minds is how do we find people with that experience to be a part of the team to bring that knowledge to the customer.
So how many Part 107 pilots are working for Adorama, and are you guys like spread out over the country, or how does that work?
So gosh, I have to look and see how many we have now. I think, do we have 6 or 7 pilots, somewhere around there?
So.
And we're actually about to add on some more. So that's kind of where it's been at right now. We've just been trying to figure out, the marketing side of things and kind of get our bearings straight. And I just started in this position within the last 60 days. So, I cover all the different facets of the B2B, whether it's pro cinema, pro audio, video, IT forensics, and then all the specialists that fall within those. So the drones has been something we've been really pushing hard on. It's just been trying to figure out, what product lines we want to bring in this year, what we want to invest in, and then what, pilots we want to accompany that to go out there in the field to do that. So.
Are there different roles involved? So, for example, do you mostly do search and rescue, or what are some of the areas that you tend to focus on the most?
Yeah, I think definitely the public safety, search and rescue, type of feel is the most prominent. We're branching and making a huge push this year into oil and gas inspection. And then I recently started working a lot with road crews that do like highway work. So we were showing, like yesterday, I was actually out flying, showing how to inspect a bridge that was starting to crumble away, and they were looking at delamination on the surfaces of the bridge to see what was actually going on more deep rooted, and how they could use that where they weren't having to put, people on the ground and shutting roads down. They could actually do an inspection from the air, keep traffic moving, and keep their people out of the roadway.
So with use cases that are that specific for people that are drone pilots and they come and join Adorama, like, are you guys do you have a special onboarding program or educational programs, or is it just Part 107?
No, it's definitely an onboarding process, and we really look to see, it's interesting as I've come to get to know this industry more. The drone network is really kind of small, although it's big, and across the country, some of the key players and people that have been around for a while seem to be pretty well known. So that makes it a little bit easier in trying to vet somebody to bring them on. But yeah, I mean, we kind of want to know a little bit more of their history with the drones, how long they've been flying, where they've used it, what certifications they have that they can bring to the table, as an offering to their name. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you fly any BVLOS, or, for those not familiar, beyond visual line of sight missions?
We don't a whole lot, no. I mean, we have customers that are interested in it, and obviously trying to get a lot of those, waivers to do that. So I think it's definitely something that we're going to evolve in a lot this year. It's probably one of the biggest targets, I think, just because there's so much, wrapped around that, and obviously people talking about remote ID and what that's going to involve. So there's a lot of those things we're trying to get out in front of to see what is actually going to happen with them, and then where we need to stand with product offerings and trainings that kind of are encompassed in that. So.
Thank you, James, for bridging that for me. Remote ID was going to be our next topic. Talking about, I mean, the drone industry is kind of fascinating, right? I mean, not only is the technology changing so rapidly, but also the regulations are catching up and changing. And one of the big things that's coming down the pike is remote ID for drones. Do you guys want to share your thoughts on drone regulation and remote ID specifically?
Yeah, I can see that obviously the benefit of having it, how they'll roll it out, and what'll actually come of it when it comes time. Is the biggest question. We talk a lot with, our manufacturers, DJI, Autel, SenseFly and those, and kind of, hey, what are you guys doing? What's out there? How are we gonna, bridge into this spectrum? And nobody knows or has really any solid, information. So that'll be curious to see how as we get into July and August and kind of, towards the end of the year, when it'll actually roll out, what'll actually come. I think everyone's been dying to hear what's going to come from the FAA's mouth on how this is all going to happen and what we're going to require drones to have technology-wise to use it. If it's going to be the European side of things, or if we're going to create our whole new system here in the United States. So.
Right. Yeah, I think from my perspective, I can, totally understand the value of it. I don't envy the folks that are in charge of rolling it out, kind of like James was alluding to. It's got to be a tough task. But if it's done right and it helps the proliferation of drones, I think I'm all for it.
So I think one of the biggest concerns surrounding remote ID is an issue of privacy. The pilot's location being broadcast not only to law enforcement, but any member of the public. Does this worry you at all?
Not really, no. I think that, it's one of those things that people are a little skittish of when you first get into something, but then the reality of it is it probably isn't as bad as you thought it was going to be. Just like people were, kind of nervous about law enforcement getting into using drones, for search and rescue and what we were going to be doing, if we were going to be spying or, looking in places we shouldn't, having some of that, especially if it's tracked, I guess I don't really see a problem with it being known, just so that, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you really shouldn't have anything to worry about. And maybe being able to validate that, the complaints that we had used to take at different times about drones searching or looking in someone's house and then going to try and have a conversation with somebody and figure it out. And those ongoing kind of complaints, if we had that tracked, you could basically kind of prove, or show, if it's tracking your whereabouts, that you were never there in the first place, and we can kind of clear up those types of situations pretty quickly and easily. So, I don't know for the consumer that'd be something terribly hard to I guess get on board with, so I know you can obviously pull flight logs if you wanted to anyway, if you wanted to do something like that with certain brands, but I think if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then there shouldn't be any room for concern. So personally.
Okay.
I think perhaps one of the challenging things with remote ID is that it's kind of like a one-size-fits-all. And if you look at how we have different drone categories, I mean, if you compare FPV flying versus, let's say, the dreams that Amazon has, where they use or they're hoping to use maybe sometime in the future to deliver all kinds of products to consumers by drone. Do you feel that the FAA should come up with different remote ID solutions for these different groups of people using drones? Would that make sense?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, obviously there's going to be at some point a virtual highway in the sky, if you will, where, I'm sure these heavy lift drones that are doing delivery for Amazon or Domino's Pizza or whatever gets on board with that type of thing. The last thing you'd want to have to worry about if you were the Amazon operator running that drone program, or one of these other bigger companies, is somebody flying at high speed into your traffic lane, just like you wouldn't want it to happen on the ground, type of thing. So yeah, I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of benefits to it that way, for sure, and giving some clarity to what's going on where in the country, so.
They kind of try to do something like that with the 250 gram limit, right? If smaller drones under that, you don't really need to adhere to the remote ID. So there's already one split, and I guess to your point, I think there will be more splits as this it gets implemented. They do learning, and they continue to just kind of make improvements on it. I think we will see some sorts of splits, and then you might see where the consumer hobbyist, maybe his position will only be broadcasted to law enforcement, whereas enterprise or businesses are broadcast publicly. So I'm not sure how they'll change that, but I think it does make sense to have different classifications.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, is when you have a industry that's changing so rapidly and people are adopting drones and using it in so many different ways, that regulation is not, the process to create regulation is not designed to move at the same speed at all. So I wouldn't be surprised either if we see fine tuning of the regulations from the FAA over time.
Absolutely.
Shifting gears to some specific drone models, can you guys share anything about what you thought about the DJI Mavic 3 launch last year and the firmware updates that unlocked some of the features that were promised weren't there initially? And can you perhaps also share how successful the launch of the Mavic 3 has been, let's say, compared to the Mavic 2 a couple of years ago?
Oh, I don't know if you had anything on that. Yeah, I think that the Mavic 3 definitely was the waiting game. Everybody had the users of the Mavic 2. I'm being obviously one of them for many years. Kind of curious to see what the next edge that DJI was going to put on. There's always been this kind of race to the top, and Autel comes out with something and they make it maybe a little bit better feature set than what DJI had, and the DJI comes out again and have something crazy out there that sets them a little bit more apart. So I definitely think that the Mavic 3 was a very strong launch. I think, of course, in the midst of everything going on in the world where there's supply chain constraints and that type of thing. So that's I think put a hamper on a lot of our launches. I think a lot of the product launches we've had, whether it was the Mavic 3 or the Autel systems, weren't as hot as they probably would have been, just because it was hard to get those products in more than a small case of them at a time. But and I don't think that what they did with the Mavic 3 was terribly off from what I've seen in some of the other products that we've had, where they had it limited and all of a sudden a firmware upgrade came up and it fixed a lot of underlying issues type of thing. So why they do it that way, I'm not really sure, but it seemed like it was fixed pretty easily, and I didn't personally hear of much complaints of people saying that they were terribly upset with the way that went. So.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what has been going on, of course, inside a private company like DJI. But I mean, chip shortages, supply chain issues, COVID. I mean, it must have been a challenging time for them and for any other company launching a product, I would imagine.
Sure.
Yeah. I think one thing that was interesting is that the Cine model with the built-in terabyte space was maybe more attractive to consumers than I would have thought. I think that built-in storage, just by looking at the numbers and sales quantities, that people were willing to pay for that terabyte maybe more than I would have thought. So that was just a little bit interesting to me to see that. But the camera is obviously incredible, and it's a great platform. So it's really, really impressive drone, no doubt.
Yeah. If you go for the Cine version, for sure, that's quite a bit more expensive than what I think a lot of people were used to paying for a DJI Mavic 2.
Yep.
But yeah, that's good to hear that that was actually such a successful launch in that sense.
Yeah, we recently had Sparky Sorensen on, and his only comment was that the storage you should be able to remove it and put in, another terabyte slot, and maybe DJI will do that. It's certainly an attractive feature to me, because I have had more than enough issues with regular SD cards. So I'm actually flying a Cine right now for DP review and finishing up my thoughts on the new features that were unlocked this month. So it's definitely convenient to be able to just stick a little cable in there and not have to rely on an SD card. Just onto a few more models. Autel, which is another big manufacturer and a competitor to DJI, recently released a Nano series, which is a sub 250 gram drone, and also the Lite, which could be like a mid-range consumer, kind of comparable to the DJI Air 2S. Do you have any thoughts on those models?
Yeah, I think that they were long overdue as far as Autel is concerned, as far as getting something in that competitive space, against DJI. They did a great job with the Evo 2 when they kind of bridged it up into the 6K Pro and they're a little bit larger format drone, or frame drone, I should say. And I think that everyone was kind of looking to say, like, hey, as I build into the ecosystem of Autel, the only thing that's kind of holding me back is I like what I have in the DJI stuff. So there were, some people are just love their brand, right? Their brand dedication, where I just want everything DJI, I want everything Autel. And so there were some people getting a little restless, I think, with, hey, I love this Autel system I use on the larger format of stuff. I want something on that smaller format. So yeah, what they've launched now is pretty interesting, with some of them having audio recording built in, and obviously high resolution sensors, and maybe adding a couple features that DJI didn't have. But I'm sure DJI will be coming back here pretty quickly with something to, rock the boat on that side of things too. But
yeah, Yeah, competition is good for the customer. So, and I think especially in an industry when you have a player like DJI that has 70% of market share. So it's awesome to see Autel come out and kind of compete with the Mini, compete with the mid-level Air models. And I think, excited to see kind of what comes next.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things is with Autel is that there isn't any geofencing. Some people, if you go into any forum, you'll see people having frustrations where they've unlocked a region with DJI's geofencing, and then they can't take off. The drone is grounded. Also, there's a privacy feature where you aren't required to create an account to fly an Autel drone. Do you think that is something that is appealing to customers?
I know definitely on the public safety side, not having to deal with the geo unlock has been a huge deal for them, is to be able to just pick it up and go and not have to worry about going through that process. And DJI has made it a lot easier, but I think just out of the box, being able to pick it up and go has made a huge impact as far as decision making with public safety agencies deciding to go with that, maybe over DJI.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, especially when you're under time stress and you need the drone in the air fast, then you don't have time for geo unlocking and stuff. Yeah. What I was personally really excited about when I first heard that Sony was going to come up with a drone, I thought, hey, now we finally have a company with deep pockets. They are well established in the consumer electronics market. That might be awesome. That might actually give DJI a run for their money. Now, of course, Sony didn't come out with a Mavic competitor. They came out with the Airpeak, which is a much larger, much more expensive platform, if you will. What are your guys' thoughts about that drone? Because I know some people were concerned that the battery life might not be sufficient to fly such a large drone with then a heavy payload. Any thoughts there?
We actually had the first one. I think it was the first one that came in the country. We did an unveiling at Accelerate last year. And we were with the Sony guys. They brought it out, came in from overseas, and we all saw for the first time. They hadn't even seen it yet in person. I think, when you look at some of these platforms, obviously they all have, something that they shine at and that they're meant to do. And I think with what the Sony can do, we have our demo unit coming in here shortly. It's meant to do that heavy payload and to do more cinema driven, obviously work. So to handle that kind of heavy payload, I mean, before that, it was really like the M600, from DJI, that you would put something like that kind of camera on, or another heavy payload camera if you could find, or drone if you could find one. So I think, for what that is, its use cases, I mean, yeah, granted, it would be awesome to have, longer battery life. And I'm interested to see how they evolve this platform. If it's going to be a Mavic, like you talked about earlier, where maybe some firmware upgrades, maybe, some longer duration batteries start coming out, or higher capacity batteries to be able to do longer duration. But, to do cinema runs or to do some of this, I guess, it had a strong takeoff from the beginning. We had a lot more pre-orders than I know we anticipated with it. So a lot of people were excited for it.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially people that have Sony A7 series cameras already in use, to be able to use those cameras, and they're awesome for video, and then have interchangeable lenses. That makes it definitely attractive. In your conversations with Sony, have you guys picked up on any hints that Sony is dedicated to the drone industry and they might come out with a consumer model at some point?
I don't know that they've alluded to that yet. I think they're just trying to figure out how the Airpeak is going to go, that I at least have picked up in conversations with them. And they're a great company to work with. They definitely want to hear what's going, what's the good, what's the bad, how they can help, promote business and build something that is going to be catered to what people really want. So they want to hear, all the bad things about it. So, and they obviously know it's got a shorter battery life. It does something unique, different to what other drones are doing with that kind of payload. Like you said, you can put, a piece of Zeiss glass, a cinema glass on this drone and fly it around, which is pretty incredible for all the options you have built into that ecosystem. So yeah, I haven't seen anything yet, but I don't doubt for sure that they'll come out with something mid-size.
Yeah, I tend to.
Yeah,
I tend to agree. Yeah, I haven't seen anything yet, but they're absolutely committed. They spent a ton of time and work on the Airpeak launch, and yeah, I would bet they're coming out with something. I just can't say for sure or when, but yeah.
So as we come up toward the end of the show, we always ask our guests the same question. what is your favorite drone to fly? Do you have a particular favorite brand? And also any gear that you like to use?
Man, I can start just because my answer will be much shorter than James's. But I mean, I love the midsize. So I have an Air 2, and I use the heck out of it, and I think it's great for what it is. And I even got my dad a DJI Mini, and I think like last Christmas we were flying it inside his house, and that was a blast too. So I'm just used to the DJI platforms. Just what I've been flying. I haven't had my hands on too many of these other enterprise systems, candidly, either, though. So, I'd love to hear what James says, though.
I think out of the aerial systems, I'm a huge fan right now of the DJI FPV. We've adapted to run interior tactical search operations for agencies that are on a more of a limited budget and can't afford a higher level system. It's an amazing system for what it is. It's tons of fun to fly. But I think even more so than that now, we ran a lot of underwater robotics where I was at in my previous life. And so having the underwater ROVs to play around with, I'm surrounded by lakes, so I love actually going underwater quite a bit and kind of seeing what's in and around the lake areas that we get into a little bit. So.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to throw in one last question then. I thought that the DJI FPV, knowing that it's not a full-blown FPV drone, maybe as some of the hardcore FPV drone pilots would have liked, but to me it made sense for all the people that might be intimidated to fly FPV, but at the same time are curious to try it out. The DJI FPV kind of bridges that gap, right? It makes it easy to fly, and once you get the hang of it, you still get that sensation of actually being up in the air and getting that perspective through the goggles. Have you guys seen in the sales of the FPV system that it were consumers who were thinking of getting into FPV, that those were the people who would buy this drone, or no?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people in that realm that were just never sure. I was one of those people. I dabbled with FPV early on, but I didn't have the patience for what a lot of people put into that.
Yeah.
And so for me, I wanted something just kind of more plug and play that I can kind of play around with a little bit in that realm, but also not have to go through the headaches of rebuilding things and fixing things when they went wrong and very limited flight time. So, I think it's been hugely successful in that, and it flies just as beautifully as any other DJI product does. Just it gives you some more options to have a little more fun and high speed action. So.
Right. And they have the flight, like you were alluding to, they have the flight simulator, which can get the pilots up and running and make sure that they're not crashing it or anything like that. So it's a great entry level FPV system for sure.
I was flying it under a bridge last night for doing this roadway inspection with this county highway department, and it was the only drone that I could get underneath the bridge without losing reception or any signal issues, and I could look completely straight up underneath the bridge and never worried what it was doing at that level. So for them to do something like a bridge inspection like that, which they have a lot of, and spend under $1,500 for a drone to be able to do that, says something about that platform. And
that might be the use case that DJI never imagined.
Exactly. And they can have some fun while they're at it, so they can take it out and buzz around a little bit. So
yeah, of course.
Right.
Awesome.
So I want to thank you both so much for joining us today. To our audience, don't forget to check out Adorama.com for your drone and camera needs. You can find PiXL Drone Show on YouTube. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, and share with your friends. We air live every Tuesday, so just make sure you tune in. And thank you guys again, both CJ and James. Your experience and your stories, your knowledge, all appreciated on here today.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having us.